Hello, everybody. Hopefully, you can hear me. Let me make the microphones a bit closer. So, there's a stormy weather right now, and I think there's stormy weather across the UK, maybe even across Europe. So, I thought I'd do a little live today just to talk about how to manage or cope with miserable weather in quotation marks. And as I reflect on it, there's a 3A approach. There's three different things that you can do to help you cope with miserable weather. So the first thing is let's talk about weather in terms of what does it mean by weather, and then there's we talk about in mindfulness not just external weather but internal weather. And it's not the external weather that's actually the problem when we talk about miserable weather. There's That's not so much the challenge. The challenge is the internal weather it brings up in terms of the emotions and the thoughts that may come up. So the question is, how do we handle this? How do we cope with this? So I would say that there's a 3A approach to coping with it. And I'm going to go through them. And the first one is one which is very much associated with mindfulness, which is awareness. How do you spell it? So awareness is really, really key because that's the beginning of everything. So if you want to be able to handle or cope with external challenging weather or internal challenging weather, you need to become clear about what's going on there. Um, let's say if you're traveling and you weren't clear or weren't aware about what the weather was going to be like, then you can just end up getting yourself into trouble and finding yourself in really bad weather conditions which you wouldn't be able to cope with. And it's the same with internal weather. Excuse me. Sometimes we think our internal weather is much worse than we actually realize. And when we turn our attention inwards to how we're feeling, you realize that actually the feelings that I have is not what I'd assumed or jumped in terms of conclusions to. So there's a lack of clarity there. And as you start to become more aware of your internal weather rather than being frightened by it, then there's some opportunity for choice and some opportunity for change. So awareness is really important when it comes to external or internal weather. And when it comes to awareness, there's always the three things: thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations. So consider what thoughts are coming to my head, what feelings am I noticing, and those feelings quite often are linked to the bodily sensations that you're having as well. So when you start to cultivate awareness, think of TFB. You've heard of BFG, or this is the TFB. You've probably heard of TSBT, the bank. So the second really, really important one that goes along with awareness is a sense of allowing or acceptance. Now, there's a lot of people that don't like acceptance because there's loads of things that they want to change. But guess what? Things that you can't change, you need to accept. And something like the external weather, unless you've got a direct line to God and you can just tell her or him to just change the weather instantly, you're just going to have to accept it. So if there's stormy weather outside, you need to accept it. And if there's stormy weather inside, we need to learn to accept that too. So there's the external acceptance of what's going on in terms of your external situation. And if you can change something, it's easy to change it and you want to change it and it doesn't harm everyone else, please go ahead and change it and start taking action towards doing that. But then there's also the internal, and that's when it gets really interesting, the internal acceptance. So if you find some of you may be loving this weather, I'm sure, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But in terms of internal weather, how do you accept it? And it's to realize and to notice and to appreciate that as human beings, we have a whole rainbow of emotions. And the problem is not the low mood or the high mood or the anxiety or all that. The problem is the avoidance of it. There's so much research in mindfulness, in acceptance and commitment training, in many of the what they call third wave CBT. That it's the avoidance that's the problem, not the noticing and accepting. So the challenge for us human beings is to cultivate a sense of acceptance. So how do we do that? In fact, awareness works really, really well. As we become more aware of it, it becomes easier to accept it. And I've talked about in lots of other videos about the transcendent self or the observer self. And if you can tune into that observer self, I'll write it here. Unfortunately, it doesn't start with A, otherwise that would be perfect. The more you can tune into the observer self, the transcendent self, the part which is observing all your experience, the more you can identify with that, the easier it is to accept, because you know that you're not your emotions. It's just a passing feeling that's going through. So there's awareness, there's acceptance, and last but not least, and this is something I've been reading about more recently, attitude. So I read a great article in The Guardian last week about Norway, and they did some research because in some really northern parts of Norway, they only get 3 hours of sunlight a day. And what they found is that the higher and higher and higher they went in altitude, so it became darker and darker and darker, when they did an analysis of their mindset, they found that their mindset was more and more positive towards winter. And they thought winter is more and more of a wonderful experience. And some of them couldn't actually even understand why people would not like winter, because they associate it with coziness, with being at home, with lighting candles, with snuggling up. I don't know, all the different things that they would associate with it in terms of positive, and also things like skiing, which they have available. So they saw it as a really positive thing. But the interesting thing is the mindset became more positive, and the researchers thought maybe that was from a survival perspective, because the more the positive the mindset, the more they would be able to handle the challenging weather that they experienced or the lack of sunlight. So attitude is really important thing. Another word for it is mindset. And if you want to read more about mindset, there's a book by Carol Dweck, D-W-E. I think that's the surname. I think it's something like that. Carol Dweck. Very popular book. Some nice research that she's done on mindset and attitude. So some of you may want to check that out. So they're the three A's of handling difficult internal and external weather. Let's see if I can get that. There you go. Take a screenshot of that if you want. And there's nice things to remember in terms of not just for challenging weather, but for any time actually, awareness, acceptance, and the attitude we bring to things. And if we can take that approach, I think it would be very, very helpful. So let's see if we have any comments or questions. I love the interaction. Oh, hi Jenny, good to see you here. You go, I can click this and it'll say good morning on the screen. Good to see Jenny. Jenny's very good at the attitude. The happiness guru, I think she is, something like that. Or was it laughter guru? Very positive guru for sure. Excellent. So would love to hear your thoughts about that, comments, questions, complaints. Actually, cancel the complaints. Let me know what you think, and I hope you have a great Sunday. Seeing awareness, acceptance, and maybe a shift of attitude. Have a great day, everybody. Bye for now.